Welcome, everybody, to a very special Captain America Day episode of Comic Watchers. Comic Watchers is brought to you by Comic Watch. Comic Watch is your source for all your media and comic news and reviews written by fans for fans. I'm your host, Cody, and we've got a pretty exciting show for you today. Today we'll be spotlighting 3 books: Fantastic Four, Prodigal Son, #1, Doom Patrol, Weight of the World, #1, and Lois Lane, #1. But first, let's get the crew to introduce themselves. Gang?
Brian from Portland.
Portland now, huh?
Mm-hmm.
It's me, John Jack, a scant 180 miles north of Brian now. I'm a little scared.
You should be.
This is Pat in Oklahoma City.
Hey, I'm Nicholas Osborne from Carthage, Texas, the middle of nowhere.
Now, before we get to our spotlight books, we're so grateful to have Brian back as a regular again. Brian, what news do you have for us?
Yeah, so it's actually good to be back. Unfortunately, not everything is here. I still have another trip to go back to Arizona, which I do tomorrow. And hopefully I'll have furniture that I can do this podcast on, since I'm literally doing it from an air mattress. Not my finest moment, guys. Not at all. Okay, so in other news, more important news, The Walking Dead had some big news. In the last issue, Rick Grimes was definitely killed off. However, that's not their biggest surprise. They're ending the series. That's it. It's done. What is Image going to do now? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens on that. So there's some other news in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's always been the 4 brothers for as long as I can remember, right? Can anybody remember a different time?
Yeah, there was a sister in the mid-2000s.
And they killed Donatello once.
Yeah.
I feel that they're technically blood brothers.
So I didn't think this was how this conversation was going to go, because I was going to assume everybody would say no.
Yeah, that was supposed to be rhetorical, clearly.
Yeah.
Not in this group.
So the sister is coming back, so they're going to add a female Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. That should be pretty cool. But is she going to be a ninja, considering she didn't grow up with them? I don't know. We'll have to see.
Can't you still be a ninja?
Huh? What was
That's
that?
sexist, Brian.
Maybe she'll be a pacifist.
Maybe.
Oh, like Wonder Man.
And this next piece of news is solely for JJ. So Tom Holland wants to see Spider-Man fight dinosaurs. So could we see a dinosaur in an upcoming Tom Holland movie? I certainly hope not.
What's that?
But who knows?
The best thing would be a fist fight with a gorilla. That is the only thing. If I see that, a superhero movie where they fist fight a gorilla, that I just want to see that before I die. I don't care. It could be Titano versus Superman, just like a throwaway, 40-foot tall robotic gorilla with a kryptonite heart. That would be fine. Gorilla Grodd in the Flash movie. Why not? It's not necessarily impossible.
There's a lot of gorillas in comics to choose from.
Yeah.
That's true.
So I read something on the news, but I couldn't find it when I was looking for it for the second time. I guess I'm not caught up, but I guess they just killed off a major X-Men character in one of the late.
Like
Which
50
one?
of them.
So many.
Rosenberg kills somebody every single episode, or every single issue. At least one person.
Because I'm not caught up, I'm actually planning on catching it today, maybe. I don't know. It depends how well my internet's working, which I don't even have that. I barely have electricity, guys.
Killed 2 major characters in the last War of the Realms tie-in. Like a book, like maybe a quarter of his X-Men fan base read.
All right, and the final.
2 characters.
And the final piece of news that I have is a rumor by comicbook.com. Captain Marvel is rumored to say that Brie Larson will appear in 5 more MCU movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it makes sense.
That's probably true. Marvel
Yeah.
loves to stack the deck like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, we're replacing Captain America, sort of. So,
Yeah,
Probably
she's
why.
part of the next generation, so they
Yeah.
probably lock her in for a little bit.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's
Huh.
all I got, guys.
Well, awesome. That's a pretty interesting news week. So now Nick is not going to be able to be with us for the entire time, but he did want to be with us specifically for the Doom Patrol Weight of the World #1 portion of the show. Partly because he's a man on an island with this book. So, of course, Doom Patrol launched on DC's Young Animal imprint. Gerard Way writing it, picking up where he left off with the previous 12-issue Doom Patrol series from last year, about a year ago, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
we've got-
closer to 2.
they
Yeah.
were in the crossover event in 2018.
Okay. Cartoonist James Harvey on the art on this one. The general premise is this is catching us up to where the Doom Patrol are now after the events of the Milk Wars crossover of last year. And then it moves into kind of a standalone one-off story of the Doom Patrol going out and doing something weird. There's a planet and they're fighting body dysmorphia, and I mean it's a fine one-off story, but it's a one-off story. Read it for yourself. Make your own judgments on that. Why don't we start with Nick and your takeaway of this #1 issue of a new Doom Patrol series?
Okay, so yeah, we've had a lot of discussions, I guess, today about it. It kind of turned into one that we had a lot of back and forth over. And I'll start with where I've come to realize this issue may not have had its strengths at. I think the worst thing that they did was plaster #1 on this issue and then allow it to function as a number 13. The creative team put issue number 13 within the panel, but on the cover you've got #1. This is something Marvel does a lot, and my comic store kind of isn't a big fan of it because they'll have, issue 20 or 25 or something, and they've got #1 put on it because it's the first start, or it's the first issue to a new arc. And that's kind of how this one functioned. It was the start to a new arc in Gerard Way's run that started back in 2016. So you had a bunch of people coming into it with the new show starting on the DC universe, and they see Doom Patrol #1. The series just came out, everybody loved it, so they jump into it looking for something to read. And this is a continuation of something that's been going on for 2 years now. So it creates these expectations that I think a lot of people are having troubles getting over. But the the next issue is kind of the pacing and how you said it's split into introducing the Doom Patrol and where they're at now, and then turning into this one shot. I think that pacing, you can tell it almost could have been 2 separate stories that he could have fleshed out and told a little bit more. But he merged them into one to create this one-shot feel that both catches you up and tells a finite story. And for what it is, I'm such a fan. I read Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol, and I know it's iconic, and I talked about it in my review. You can read it at Comic Watch. It's iconic to the status where it creates expectations for any creative team following that to come in, and now they almost have these shoes to fill. And with a team like Doom Patrol, they can be so outlandish and so particular in ways that worked for Grant Morrison and what he brings to the table. And then they come in with someone like Gerard Way, who is in that same vein, who's wacky and zany, but it's split whether people think it's based in originality or whether he's trying to channel something or sometimes copy someone like Grant Morrison and what they bring. But a lot of it is expectations. We talked, I think, in Criminal, when everybody really loved the book, my complaints were a lot of it predicated on not being accessible. And y'all mentioned there were different expectations for books outside of these main 2, like DC and Marvel. And I'm wondering if a pop-up imprint like Young Animal kind of follows along the same standards where it creates different expectations. And that's something what I'm bringing into this perspective of Doom Patrol, because he's not trying to do what Grant Morrison's doing, and I don't think he's fitting in with what DC's doing post Rebirth. So this is a valid statement with what he's trying to do with both Doom Patrol and the Young Animal imprint. But getting more to what he's doing, like the issue has so much heart and humor and crazy spectacular visuals, and it's right in the lane of what Doom Patrol should be. But I see it. he touches on the vein that I know Grant Morrison does, but
Yeah, but
he brings.
I have to interrupt you. There are other writers that have written Doom Patrol over the years that established what Morrison latched onto. So, like all the old Drake stories from the 60s and 70s, that was what Morrison was latching onto and expanding on. Same as Kupperberg's run. Kupperberg's run is criminally underrated because it just happened to precede Morrison's run. But that was a very instrumental run of Doom Patrol. And
it speaks to the impact that Morrison had on it as well. Like, you can't say Doom Patrol without Morrison immediately coming into the conversation. And
sure,
he had that kind of impact on these characters. But
yeah, I just think that that narrow vision of Doom Patrol as being kind of the quirky stuff that Morrison did is actually just as damaging to this book as anything else, because Doom Patrol and what they stand for is so much bigger. Like, they are the team that the X-Men ripped off.
Yeah, I think he takes it to a level that's so much bigger through channeling the sense of positivity that I've been talking about that Morrison doesn't have. He brings a positive twist to what is a foundation created by all these writers and the wacky, zany stuff that you come to expect. And John mentioned that it's almost like a parody of itself. And if you don't like the book, you can get to that point. But if you're trying to participate with what he's doing, he's not parodying itself. He's using it as a platform to explore these different themes and use these characters to explore senses of positivity and societal impact. That's why Body Dysphoria goes right in line with what he's doing here. I thought it's a psychological issue that kind of goes into it, and it opens it up to an emotional level, but it walks the line between the imaginary and reality thing. And I think he brings that sense of intimate character development and positivity to these characters that Morrison generally had them in typical superhero scenarios where they were forced to deal with their ultimate struggles and things like that weren't quite in the vein of them becoming this positive sense of superheroes.
What is the name of this book?
The Weight of the Worlds.
What's the first part of the name of this book?
Doom Patrol. And
wait, what's that?
Yeah, Doom Patrol.
Doom Patrol. Like, the entire structure of this series for 60 years has been they're fucking losers. That they are misfits and outcasts, and they suck at everything they do, and they're not good superheroes, and they're not really good people. Yeah. And they are doomed. And now all of a sudden, here comes Gerard Way with his balloons and fucking unicorns, and they're all happy, and we're going to help everybody because we're My Little Pony now. Because it's so schlocky that it has completely inverted on itself and become a parody of everything that Doom Patrol has been for 60 years. 60 years.
I don't think it's such an outright parody of it. I think he's using positivity in a way to bring something new to the Doom Patrol, and that's why I think he's tapped the vein of being original and not ham-fisted.
Ugh.
But I think the book works. It's worked for 12 issues, and this is a continuation of things that have been good.
Let's see, and that's an argument that we could have some other time, but I don't think it worked for 12 issues. I think it worked for about 3 issues of that last run, and then he tried to promote himself beyond, like, somebody who is a fan of Grant Morrison writing in Grant Morrison's shadow. And instead of creating something of his own, he took something and flipped it on its head. And that, to me, isn't good writing or conscious writing. Like, that's just taking something and making it your own for the sake of doing it. And I didn't feel like it was well executed at that. Like, create some new characters. But you're still working with all of Grant and Drake's characters. Make a new Doom Patrol character.
I mean, it's within DC's cast of characters too. I mean, this is what any writer comes in and takes these characters and brings their take into it and creates something new out of it. I don't think Gerard Way has done anything different. He's come into these characters that have come or that have existed before Morrison even and after, and he's taken that foundation and injected his own interpretation or iteration, however you want to put it, and he's created something new out of it. And I think that's one why it's under the Young Animal imprint. It's kind of, it was used to sell that imprint, basically. It kicked it off, and that's what brought the event together for Milk Wars. I think they gave Gerard Way this freedom because of what he's doing with it, because it's so different. He has almost full creative reins, it seems, over this to do what he wants. And it's definitely not Grant Morrison. Like, I know I talked about it before, but it just can seem like you want to project those expectations on what this is going to do. And
but see, I didn't have any expectations on it other than for it to be good. And I thought that...
Well, you did just mention like the 60 years of what Doom Patrol has been.
Right, and you, like, in response to you saying that you thought that it was still in the vein of Doom Patrol, and I don't think that it is at all in the vein of Doom Patrol. This would be like, I don't know, having Batman get married.
Let's not open that can of worms.
Let's not go to Tom.
having Batman get dragged through the desert in the back of a horse by his dead father, hauling his dead mother's casket while seeing him on the range and fighting ninjas.
For an entire
just,
issue.
Yeah,
there are just certain things, I think, to certain properties that are immutable. Like, Uncle Ben must die for it to still be Spider-Man as we understand Spider-Man. If it doesn't happen that way, then it has to be something different. And right now, this is something entirely different. There is no connectivity to the core of what Doom Patrol is. Like, and that's fine, but own that and then do that better. And the way that he's doing it feels like almost in your face, ha, this is not your Doom Patrol. This is a plucky, happy-go-lucky group. Crazy Jane is smiling all the time. Cliff has a human body.
On the surface, it's like it takes that dark humor and it's masked in this overcompensating sense of positivity that I think he uses to explore the dynamics of the team. It feels like it's over the top because it's not exactly as it seems at face value. I think the struggles of Cliff Steele get into that when he's dealing with his mom and stuff. It seems like it's this happy-go-lucky story, but it's really not. They're dealing with societal body dysphoria and what it means on such a large level, and what kind of attitude it takes to break that. I think to disregard it as unfounded or stupid is just...
Yeah, but the attitude it takes to break that, according to the story, is for a god to come amongst you and tell you that you were wrong and this is not the mold that you were created in. Like, to me, that's...
It's the total MacGuffin moment, too. It's like they literally pull the god out of a hole and go, well, plot resolved, and that's the end of the issue.
Yeah, like, I mean, I guess
we have to solve this without punching people. You can't turn to violence to solve all these issues. That's the point.
I'm not going to turn over here and pull it out of my pocket and go,
yeah, I was
well,
going to say, well, give Gerard Way a fucking Nobel Peace Prize, because, boy, I'm glad he solved that problem for us. Of course.
Thank God, all we needed to make people not want to be fit anymore is this penny I have. Here you go, guys.
I feel like, yeah, he could have done something with that story and turned it into a really positive message, but instead he turned it into a trite, overly simplified, crashed through story. Like, any positivity that could have come out of that was lost because he lost all the nuance in it, because he gave it the ghost in the machine answer. And it just, that's amateurish. It's amateurish writing. And while we're on the subject, the lettering is amateurish. I don't know who is going to eventually take credit for that, but I showed a friend of mine with very little comic knowledge one page, and she immediately was drawn to this one word bubble that is just atrocious. And like, to be atrocious lettering, you've got to really try to screw up. I thought the whole thing felt amateurish to me. It felt like a kid playing at his dad's job.
I simply disagree. It was. We'll get to lazy writing when y'all talk about Lois Lane, but things happen. I mean, we've been following this story since 2016, so I think a bit of perspective is necessary. And this is told as an introduction, both and a one-shot. And that I said that's probably its biggest weakness, is that it tried to combine too much and it gets convoluted in trying to do that. But in no way was it lazy writing or any sort of.
I didn't say it was lazy. I said
Or
it was
amateurish.
I think it is amateurish. I think if you stand that up next to a veteran comic writer, and even we'll see this a little bit later in the show with Peter David, where
I was just about to say,
even though it was a terrible Peter David comic, it was executed better in terms of the style of writing. Like, it did exactly what it meant to do, and what it meant to do was dumb, but it did what it was supposed to do. And I thought that this didn't. It didn't. It didn't introduce readers. It didn't draw you in. 11 pages into it, and I was like, I want to be done with this. Why am I not done with this?
I think you, me, and Matt all hit the wall at the same fucking page.
Yeah, I mean, that's
the same moment in the comic where you're like, "What the fuck? There's 14 more pages of this."
I mean, that's moderately telling.
Today.
That's moderately telling that three of us at separate times in the day did hit the exact same moment. We're like, oh.
Yeah, and when you go over the reviews at Comic Roundup, it's super divisive, just like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few reviews that are 2s and 2.5s that say it's amateurish and not up to par with what DC's doing, and then the rest of them are all 9s and 10s who are on board with what he's got going on.
The other killer is that it's not up to par with what he's doing at Dark Horse either.
Yeah, like Umbrella Academy, it feels like he's trying to tap into the success that he found in Umbrella Academy, and Doom Patrol fits that vein. But he might have more flexibility with Umbrella Academy.
Mm-hmm.
It might be something like that, but I think his vision and especially the aesthetic and the tone of what he's brought to Doom Patrol, it just works for these characters. And I can't say anything outside of that. Maybe the lettering is probably not the best you're going to see out there. Some of the bubbles are haphazard at best, but to say it's the worst comic you've read this year is just, to me, asinine. There's so many worse comics that come out every week than something like this Doom Patrol one.
Well, to be fair, a lot of those really crappy comics, I can see them coming and I just don't read them. And I expected more out of this book because I am a long-time Doom Patrol fan. Like, probably, I would say, wait, how old am I now? 38? God, the first Doom Patrol comic I read was 25 years ago. Like, almost longer than you've been alive, Nick.
Yeah, maybe we're getting into generational differences here or something.
It's quite possible. It's quite possible, but yeah.
It's just, I think they're getting into something.
You're muted, Matt.
I said we could be, but this is also a comic that featured a werecat in a quasi-punk rock jacket named Lotion, and that's just silly. And that kind of gets to the heart of cat. What's that?
The panel of that cat making out with her at once roommate is forever burned in my brain. I will never forget that.
Here's my hot take on it, and I want to just do a quick hot take because we've been going on this comic for 20 minutes now. It in terms of execution, I think that you both are onto something. Grant Morrison is always going to loom over Doom Patrol. Like, it doesn't matter how different of a take Keith Giffen or John Byrne or whoever else, or hell, briefly Jeff Johns tries to take
I forgot
on.
about the Keith Giffen one.
Yeah, it was.
In
brief.
fact, I think that's what I was thinking of when I was talking about the John Byrne one earlier. I think I was thinking of the Keith Giffen one.
Yeah, both of them lasted roughly the same amount of time.
Yeah.
Just to say not very.
Okay, sorry.
But Grant Morrison just like is always going to have a shadow cast over this series. And that's not fair to other writers. You know, it's the same thing. As much as I like Scott Snyder's Swamp Thing, like every subsequent Swamp Thing writer will always be in Alan Moore's shadow. Period.
Yep. You can't talk about Snyder's Swamp Thing.
So I mean, it's not entirely fair to peg Gerard Way for leaning into the Morrison of it all, because it's there. And it seems like any time, going back to Giffen and Byrne, that a writer has tried to go away from that, it's not connecting with fans for whatever reason. You know, Byrne tried a more straightforward superheroic take, and Giffen his more trademark slapstick humor take, and neither of them worked. So yeah, Gerard Way, lean in. Fuck it, you love Grant Morrison, lean into it. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is feeling like this comic was a chore to read. Like, I get that he's trying to do. To your point, Nick, I really do. I really hear what you're saying. And I just feel like it could have been done in such a way that grabbed me as a reader. It didn't, and I think there might be a case there that I'm just not the intended audience for this comic, and that's fine. But I can read another, comic. We've read a lot of comics on here that I wasn't necessarily the target audience for, and I still didn't feel like it was a chore to get through. So I feel like at this point, Way is trying to be quirky for the sake of being quirky, and it comes off like it's wants to be pretentious, if that makes sense, but isn't, because it's too busy being quirky. And it just, the art didn't work for me. The lettering was bad to the point that it was hard to read, if we're going to get into the lettering, which I guess we are. Man, this one, it just didn't work for me, but I can totally see why somebody else might like this. I mean, maybe someone that's not been around reading comics for a quarter century would get into this more. That it just, for me, didn't work. Brian, how about you? You're about to fall asleep over there, man. What'd you think?
No, sorry, I was signing up for my internet. I didn't like it.
I missed Arby.
Arby's hot take.
No, I mean, I just didn't. Okay, so I've never read Doom Patrol. I've never really even watched the show. I hear the show is great. I think I watched the first 1.5 episodes. I just don't think I'm into it. The book was hard. Like, if you're a new reader, you don't know who the hell who is. I think Nick said it best when he's all, it shouldn't have been called a number one because people are going to think that it's going to reintroduce characters. I don't know who anybody is, so for me it fell completely flat. The one thing I will say is I did like the coloring in it. Like, I like the usage of the pinks and different types of colors throughout the book. But other than that, I won't be picking up another issue. What about you, JJ? You actually remained pretty quiet through this segment, which is hilarious.
I'm trying to be polite. So my theory on why this is a number one is Way, who is consistently turning in work months late, has actually managed the unmanageable and turned in work so late it became a different series.
Bravo.
My notes for Doom Patrol were pretty quick. I thought the comic was stupid. I did not like it at all. I thought it was ham-fisted and poorly written, and I did not like the use of, as I said, I did not like the easy resolution of this situation with the, I don't know, they're skinny and they want to be spheres, but the fact that they literally pulled the solution out of a hole and then said, well, that's that, and then what was the resolution? Did the guy go to jail? Did he get yelled at? No, he loves classic rock. Stupid. The fitness stuff was nonsense. Also stupid. The Robot Man stuff felt excessively pointless. Nick mentioned it's part of an overarching thing from the last series. None of that was conveyed to us. So in the context of this issue, we saw Robot Man as a man. We went, okay, cool. Robot Man's a man. Some dramatic shit happened, and then he died. Stupid.
Comic book death.
Unnecessarily quirky. It was trying so hard to let you know how quirky it was. It wanted to shove quirky down your throat. It's quirky. Did you know it's quirky? It's quirky. It's fucking quirky. It's a stupid, quirky fucking comic, and I'm mad that I fucking read it. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I have more notes, but I'm done.
So yeah, that's Doom Patrol: Weight of the World #1. 1 out of 4 comic reviewers recommend this.
Go read it.
So I mean, yeah, read it and make your own opinions. It is #1, even if it's not a traditional #1. That's yeah, it's up to you to make your own decisions, and I'm not going to crap on Nick for making his decision. I just wholeheartedly disagree with literally everything he had to say about it.
Nick's a smart fella, and I definitely don't think less of him for liking this comic. This terrible.
That is definitely the point of this show. I didn't wake up this morning on the day that the Walking Dead news dropped thinking that this is the hill that I would die on. But here I am. This book is good, and I will die on this hill. Gerard Way nailed it.
Well, you keep buying, and you and 10,000 other people might keep this book alive for a few minutes.
I'm gonna go ignoring it.
We'll see you next week, buddy.
All right, Nick. We're gonna miss you when you're gone. Drive safe.
Have a good one, buddy.
See, this is what happens when you like a book that nobody else does.
Well, all right. So
on to the next one.
On to the next one. How about we do Fantastic Four, Prodigal Son #1. This is from Peter David with Francesco Manna on art. This is the first part of a 3-part series introducing a new character named Prodigal. He is the greatest warrior in 5 galaxies and drops into the Savage Land and fights to get to High Evolutionary's weapons vault, and is looking for a spaceship to get out of here. And somehow the Fantastic Four get roped in, and Kazar calls them, and it's like, couldn't find the X-Men, need someone with this up their alley. Help. And they come, and they let him steal a spaceship, and then he is victim to a failsafe in the spaceship and is left in space waiting for part 2. I think part 2 is coming in Silver Surfer next.
Yeah. He didn't actually say he couldn't find the X-Men. His reasoning was the High Evolutionary is more of a Fantastic Four villain.
Oh, right. Even though the High Evolutionary, I believe, was introduced in X-Men. But we'll gloss over that. Where'd Brian go? Brian, your ceiling is really nice. I like it.
Oh, it's
not your ceiling.
It was. It's my ceiling.
Oh, sweet. All right, so Brian, what did you think of Fantastic Four: Prodigal Son #1?
Was that the other Marvel that we're supposed to read, or the
Marvel
Marvel supposed to read? Okay, so I didn't read it.
Okay, cool. Sweet. Moving on to JJ.
All right. Fantastic Four Prodigal Son. Seems like it almost wants you to be aware that it's a comic book. Again, maybe in terms of quirkiness, a little bit less overtly quirky, but I still thought it was kind of dumb. Every barrier that Prodigal was presented with, he just kind of slaps away, which is, I guess, exciting. Yeah, Peter David's pushing real hard for him to have a catchphrase. It feels very, very 90s. Like, it feels very much like a 90s book. Like, you would randomly have issues where, like, OG Damage would randomly show up in a Batman book and beat on some criminals and be like, I'm Damage, hello. And then they'd, like, have a face-to-face, and then it'd be like, catch up with Damage in the pages of Damage #1 out next month. They do shit like that all the time in the 90s. This feels like one of those, like, Prodigal's going to get an ongoing. Although I'm not against the idea of trying to push a new character or trying to introduce a new character. I guess this could be considered like the Fantastic Four's Major X.
It's not that terrible.
I didn't feel like there was any point to this comic. There was not enough Kazar. I thought the T-Rex looked good. And apparently Valeria Richards is just hot to trot, because this is the second dude we've seen her getting into. And at least this one lives on Earth, so maybe that'll come to something. But it's Peter David, not Dan Slott, so who actually knows? What did you think, Matt?
I think this comic sucked.
Yeah,
I love Peter David. Like, he's always going to be one of my favorite writers, and I think I've spoken to that more than once on this show. But this was him phoning it in all the way. No doubt in my mind, this is a paycheck comic for Peter David. There's nothing in here to justify this comic's existence. There's no real hook, even. This guy, Prodigal, drops out of space into the Savage Land, and we just start fighting, and the FF are there, and Kazar is there. And for some reason, the guy from space knows all kinds of modern Earth American vernacular, like, what fresh hell is this? I hate it when people from space use vernacular. That's just one of those things that bugs me so much. And catchphrases. And
the exposition about his powers pissed me off, too. Like, what kind of powers do you have? Oh, you've already seen most of them.
Yeah, I mean, the dude is just flat out uninteresting. There's no reason for this to be 3 issues, or 1 issue, let alone 3. The dialogue indicates to me that Peter David just isn't taking the story remotely seriously. I couldn't take it seriously. If you would like to read some good recent Peter David, please go check out Symbiote Spider-Man or the Incredible Hulk Last Call one-shot that recently came out. That's really all I have to say about this comic, other than, the art was actually pretty good. Cody, how about you?
Yeah, so I didn't hate it as much as you did. Admittedly, I couldn't sleep last night. I read this at like 1:30 in the morning. And to me, it felt like it's a comic. It's a like JJ said, it's a very 90s comic. It has that feel. I think that we're missing key elements to this mystery of who Prodigal is. The name Prodigal Son, obviously, like the Bible reference, the returning son from afar. Like, I don't think he's from space. He may have been in space for a hot minute. I think we're going to find out that this is the child of somebody that we hold near and dear that we never knew existed. And
it's the 4th Summers brother.
It's the right. And I mean,
Major X.
And I think with the fact that all the books that he shows up in, these 1, 2, 3 one-shots, seem to be Fantastic Four tied. I have a feeling we're going to find out that this is a son of Reed Richards. I'm just spitballing here. Well, I think we're going to find out this is another Reed Richards kid. Ultra powerful, like wickedly overpowered. I mean, that's right in the vein of... What's that?
You mean like Franklin?
Yeah, exactly. Like, Franklin is ridiculously overpowered. And, maybe not from this universe. I don't know how we're going to do that, but I mean, something along those lines. I think it's building to something, and I think this is just the bare minimum framework. And I think you're right. Like, David is not interested. This is a paycheck book for
all
him.
of these, are there different creators on other ones?
Different creators on all three, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah.
I thought
So
Peter
I would-
David was doing all of them.
No,
I would expect.
I thought they were all different creative teams.
Okay,
Kind of
well-
like the Defenders one shots from last year or earlier
Yeah,
this year. So yeah, I mean, it could be something great. It could be something schlocky and garbage. Jury's still out on it. I still think that he did exactly what he wanted to do, and that was my point of raising it against the Gerard Way thing. Is that I think that he set out for this to be a cheesy, overblown, silly, needless book. Like, I really think that was the intent, and he executed that intent very well, because it was overblown and silly and needless. But it felt intentional. It felt too intentional to be just an accident, because Peter David is such a thoughtful writer that I don't think that he would willingly, completely phone something in. I'm willing to give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt here.
Is he on contract to Marvel, or is he?
I'm pretty sure he's freelance.
Yeah, I think he's freelance.
Because I'm curious if that's what Duggan's deal is if he's exclusive, because he's taken some dubious stuff over the last while.
Almost nobody has an exclusive contract these days. Like, just very, very few. Like, that was really hot around 2010.
Steve Orlando does, I know. He signed one last year for DC.
Yeah.
That's why it becomes a newsworthy item when somebody does sign an exclusive, because it just doesn't happen much.
Right. Yeah, like Taylor is writing for both smartly, and probably one of the best writers at both.
I just want Zdarsky to do something at DC. I don't even care what it is. I just want it to happen. I think he would do great on Suicide Squad, but that's not to the point at all.
Renee Montoya question from Chip Zdarsky. I would buy 2 of every issue.
Because one's going to the bathroom.
so I'm going to use that as my platform. I think we've ragged on this book enough to launch into Lois Lane #1. So Lois Lane #1 from DC Comics. It's a first part of a 12-part miniseries written by Greg Rucka, art by Mike Perkins. This is, in a lot of ways, a related story to the Event Leviathan and the rise of DC's Year of the Villains story. And in a lot of other ways, this is, to me, a crime noir story about Lois doing investigative journalism in the field, getting her hands dirty, and trying to solve a 12-part mystery thriller. So, Brian.
Yes.
What were your thoughts on Lois Lane #1?
So as
Know it.
what?
Yeah, you said it. Lois funny. My bad.
So as we've all known that I'm not the biggest Lois Lane fan. I don't really like her that much, but I really like the series. I don't know if it was just because I think what it is that I don't like her as Superman's wife. Like, as an individual character, I think she's strong, independent, and I really, really enjoyed her book. I'm actually looking forward to what's going to happen. I like that it's not a typical superhero book. Like, it's kind of takes it reminds me a lot of Bendis's other stuff, like Pearl. It's not an action-packed, well, so far it's not an action-packed comic. It's kind of a mystery, and it's going to take us places that I don't think that we would have pictured Lois Lane to go. So I'm really excited about it. I think I would actually almost like to see, depending how this goes, if it continues the rate that it goes, I would like to see it continue even past 12 issues and make her own character, not just, his wife or whatever. Like, make her own person and her own character that people can really get behind, other than just, I really like Superman's wife. Like, I think that's what bugs me more than anything. That's all I got.
Matt.
Not very thoughtful, but
No, that was great, Arby.
hey,
Good to have
Welcome
you
back. I've missed you.
Yeah, really.
yeah.
So, I'm kind of two minds on this comic, and I'm the lead reviewer on this for Comic Watch. Well, I guess the only reviewer.
You can give yourself a title. It's okay.
It's very fresh in my mind because I literally just wrote my review for it like 20 minutes before we started our show. So on the one hand, this is Greg Rucka, very noted liberal-minded individual that he is, having a soapbox to stand up for the Fourth Estate in the age of He Who Shall Not Be Named.
Mm-hmm.
In that regard, it's not afraid to wear its politics on its sleeve. The press is mighty. The press has power. The press shall not be denied. And that's a good statement. We need more things, anything, making that statement other than journalism itself right now. And on that, it's good. I liked it. The problem I have with it is it gets so caught up in putting its politics out there that it winds up skimping on the plot. And honestly, there's just not that much of it. We get some great establishing scenes that show us Lois doing what she does. This is who she is. This is her world. She's a badass. We love Lois. But the actual plot so far for the next 11 issues is there was a journalist that was killed in Russia, and she knew about a thing that was bad, and so now Renee Montoya, the Question, yay, is gonna go over to Russia and beat up some dudes and get the information, and I bet Lois is gonna be in a lot of danger because of it. Okay, that's not much. This issue is a lot of it's a lot of table setting for the most part. I have a hard time with Mike Perkins as an artist because I feel like he really, really, really wants to be Steve Epting, and he's just not. And he needs to. I want him to stop trying and start being himself, because he does have talent, and he just hides a lot of it under way, way, way too heavy inks, and everything gets kind of this blotchy look to it that I don't personally care for. I think Nick was going to say something mean about this comic because he really didn't like it, but he bailed on us, I think, to go be a good husband or something. I don't know. It's like a whole thing. And
it worked.
I liked this comic, but I didn't love it like I wanted to. And that's a shame because it's right there in Greg Rucka's wheelhouse. He's made his bones writing strong female characters who kick all kinds of ass, are just a little bit damaged, and get in over their heads in mysteries. I love that. That's his stock and trade. So why didn't I love Lois Lane more? Well, I think it's because he got a little too invested in getting on his soapbox than he did in fleshing out the story. So that's my 2 cents. JJ, how about you?
Like you said, I'm kind of on two fronts on this book. I thought it was fine. I thought it was paced decently. There was a little bit of action. I liked the Clark cameo, was kind of all right. I liked seeing Montoya Question, who basically is kind of Rucka's character. So that was kind of neat. It is confusing to me, though, because we have Vic Sage operating in action at the same time. And I don't know if there was a time when both Questions were active.
No, but
No.
Hey, JJ, according to the solicits for number 3, we're going to see that confronted. He's going to deal with that.
I was just curious. It's not something I'm necessarily considering a detracting thing so much as something that's interesting to me. The White House briefing, I did think was interesting. Like you said, it was a little bit on the nose in terms of real life politics bleeding into fictional world, which I'm not usually a fan of, but I was generally okay with it for the most part. It did definitely feel like Lois Lane to go after the White House spokesperson like that. Did you guys catch that they named, when they were naming the donors, it was LexCorp, one other, and then Shaw and Agger, which would be, Sebastian Shaw and Dario Agger from Marvel.
Right.
I did catch that. That's brilliant.
I thought that was actually pretty clever because they're both like evil as hell and super rich. Like they're like Lex Luthor level in terms of being bad and rich in the Marvel universe. Like it wasn't quite like having Doctor Doom or something like that, but it was a much more subtle. Sorry, there's a car license plate reflecting right into my eyes. It was a much more subtle little thing that I caught and I really liked. One of my big issues with this is how much can possibly happen in this series. I feel like it's really going to be handcuffed due to how tightly wound it's going to be with the Bendis stuff that's going on. And the trouble is, if we're not getting any development in 14, 15 issues of Leviathan wind-ups and Leviathan, how much development are we going to get in this series, which is tangentially connected to that? If we can't get an answer to a simple question like, where does Rogolzar come from? I mean, how is Lois Lane going to tie her shoes? So I don't know. I'll continue reading it, but I don't know how excited I am about it. What do you think, Cody?
So yeah, raise your hand if you read Rucka's run on Batman. This has all of the same feel, down to heavily inked art. Like this feels like it. Like Rucka, when Rucka started, it was a very slow burn, and Rucka does this, and in his novels as well. I've read several of his novels. We will be at issue 6 before we know why this series matters. That said, starting out, I thought it was very well executed. Like JJ said, and Matt, like the political angles, I thought, it was a little soapboxy, but it was handled really well. Like, it felt true to the character, whether or not it's true to Rucka himself, which we, because of Twitter, we know that is his political bent, but it feels true to Lois, and that's important. So, to me, I thought this was an excellent book. I felt like it was exactly how I expected this book to start. And I expect the first 2 or 3 issues for people to, it'll be a war of attrition to keep this book alive, really. Because it's going to start out, everyone's going to be excited. It's Greg Rucka writing a detective story. Awesome. And then 3 issues later, people are like, but it's not going anywhere. And then once it goes somewhere, it's going to go hard, because that's how Rucka has always done literally everything he has ever written. So if you're not aware of that pattern, like, I'm not going to fault you for not getting into this as a first issue, but you gotta trust me. I mean, you don't have to trust me. Fuck you, whatever. But you gotta trust me.
This is Cody.
This is gonna go somewhere, and it's gonna be worth it. And the ride is gonna be really fascinating to see how he pieces all this together, because right now it's several disparate threads, right? You've got Lois and whatever she's working on, the Russian not suicide, her tension with the White House, the pictures of her and Superman, which I think is not just casually thrown in here, right? That leak of her kissing Superman, and everyone's,
well,
got an
it's last
opinion
issue
on
of Action too, which is one of those things that makes me feel like it's handcuffed to Action.
Yeah, in some ways it is handcuffed to Action, but in a lot of ways, like, Action has kind of divested itself from Lois. Like, she's not as central in action as she has been in the past, 4 or 5 years. So it's almost like they've given them two separate books. Like, Action is no longer a Lois and Clark book. Action is really a Clark book. Lois Lane is a Lois book, and Superman is, cosmic space smash and grab, that kind of crap.
Come on, Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. Come on.
So I don't know. Like, I have a really good feeling about this book based entirely on my history with the writer, and it delivered in exactly every way that I hoped it would. I love Renee Montoya Question. I love Vic Sage Question. You're gonna give me both? Like, okay, thank you. Where has this been all my life? Give me 2 questions.
Every time they make some kind of question-related pun, it does make me want to punch somebody. I just want to say that. Like,
I think it's meant.
hey, where is this guy? Good question. Fuck you, Vic.
Didn't Snyder make that joke in Justice League?
Every time you see the question and that joke is made.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah.
he pointed to, like, Kendra wanting to punch Vic for doing the thing. Like, I thought it was great.
Yeah. No.
So yeah, that's my take. I'm excited for Lois Lane. I'm optimistic for Prodigal Son. I have 1 or 2 more issues of Doom Patrol in me before I just call the whole thing a wash.
Fuck all that forever.
I'm gonna do it just so that I can continue to argue with Nick.
That's really big of you. Good that you're the bigger man.
I'll pop my head in when the next creator takes over in it's gonna be like 4 years because to put out 12 issues is gonna take him 3 years.
Probably Bendis. He aims to take over everything at DC that is least suited to him.
I might prefer a Bendis book to that book I read.
Oh, I would completely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on to our final segment. Brian, can I assume that you have not been reading, nor are you excited for anything? I'm looking at that.
That's actually true. I was trying to think if I was reading anything. I tried to, but for some reason my mobile, like my LTE, whatever, doesn't work, so I couldn't read a whole bunch. So yeah, I don't really know. Well, no, what I'm looking forward to reading is catching up on all the Age of X stuff. Because I think I left around number 2, and now I think we're wrapping it up, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. In fact, this week is Prisoner X number 5, which only leaves Apocalypse and the Extracts, and then the one shot out.
Yeah, so I'm really looking for. I actually may hold off on it so I could read it all in one. So if not that one, then I'm looking to catch up on Uncanny X-Men because I am so far behind, and I hear there's some deaths going on, and I hear there's all kinds of weird, cool stuff that's going on that I need to read about.
There's some stuff.
There's definitely some deaths.
Some things definitely happen. I'm enjoying it more than you guys because I don't have quite the attachment you guys do. And to me, it's just like, that was funny. That was gruesome.
The last time that I read it, I think Strong Guy died, Guido.
Oh man, that was like the first issue of the Rosenberg run.
Yeah, that was his first. That was
there
his
have been
first.
so many more deaths since then.
Do you recall what number that was by chance?
13, 12, no, 11.
No way. Really? Oh yeah, because they did like 10 Uncanny. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that would have been 11. Or actually, no, his first death was Blindfold, then Guido. So that's probably number 12.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Blindfold. But who doesn't forget about?
He's killed between 1 and 7 characters every issue since then.
Is he just trying to kill the? Oh, but then also I saw on the news today that what is coming up? The big arc, House of X is going to
House of X and Powers of 10
forever.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll be the judge of that.
My theory is that Hickman said I want to and I want everyone else 100% off the board.
Wait, what? Because there's three of you guys talking all at once.
My theory is that Hickman said, I want these X-Men, I want everyone else off the board, and no possibility of any of them being on the board whatsoever. So I want someone to come through and Grim Reaper like 70% of the X-Men cast, and I think Rosenberg drew the short straw.
That actually, I mean, okay.
I mean, we got, in the last 6 months, we've gotten rid of... No, I'm just saying, not even talking about Rosenberg's run. Outside of Rosenberg's run, we've gotten rid of the Young X-Men. We've gotten rid of Vampire Storm. We've gotten rid of Old Man Logan. We've gotten, like, we're cleaning house X-Men continuity-wise across multiple series, multiple X-Men who are kind of outliers outside of the actual, like, especially the duplicates seem to be getting targeted, like Dark Beast, like Vampire Storm, like the alt-young X-Men, like, you know, the alternate versions seem to especially be getting hit, which does definitely make me feel like Hickman is trying to just get them taken off the board, and he doesn't want them like cameoing in other books or anything like that. So, because Hickman's very much a big picture kind of writer, and so he doesn't want to take young Cyclops out of his book just to have him pop up in Champions.
Right.
So I think he's going out of his way to scorch the fucking earth after Bendis.
Yeah.
Various others. Who's next on the what reading?
Hey, you.
Hey, all right.
You bastard.
For me, I have been. Last weekend was a Half Price Books warehouse sale, which is like my favorite time of year. There's like 3 of them a year. So I've had a big old bag I've been bringing with me everywhere I go, and it's got a lot of Superman in it. It's got some Thor in it. I read The Fly #1 from Impact Comics, which was not terrible. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. I've also been reading Jurgen's Thor run starting in 1998 with John Romita Jr. drawing it, which is really good. And also Cullen Bunn's Sinestro series from 2014 I picked up on a whim, so I've been reading that. And that is actually surprisingly excellent. How about you, Matt?
What are you looking forward to?
Oh, you know, comic books. Just
okay, fair enough.
Green Lantern #9 comes out this week, which I'm pretty excited for. I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited for the end of War of the Realms. I've been writing like 6 to 10 reviews a week for 12 weeks now. I have like 5 to go, and then I'm done. But I am also legitimately excited for the Omega issue. There were some loose threads left from 6 that I'm curious if they'll be tied up. Now, what about you, Matt?
So I bought the first trade of the Image series Chew by John Layman and Rob Guillory.
Mm-hmm.
And it's awesome.
Yeah.
I've heard nothing but good things, but I've never read.
I checked it out because Outer Darkness is so fucking great. So I wanted to look in on this other series by John Layman. And yeah, so awesome. The basic premise of it is that chicken has been outlawed because of a bird flu epidemic that apparently infected all of the chickens and it can kill people. But in the wake of that, the FDA is basically a bunch of stormtroopers that run around raiding illegal chicken operations. And our lead character's name is Tony Chu, and he is a Sebopath, which means that if he eats something, he knows everything about the history of it. So if he eats an apple, he knows where it was grown, what pesticides were used on it, etc., etc.
I have to bail. My phone's going to die, but thanks for listening, everybody, and I will see you next week.
Thanks, John. We'll see you next week.
Yep.
This leads to a lot of instances of cannibalism, and it's a fun, crazy book. I really, really can't wait to read the remainder of this series. What I'm looking forward to is something I wish went blank on. It was something from DC. Naomi. Naomi #6 is shipping about 3 weeks late. And that looks like it's going to be awesome. Awesome wrap up to an awesome series from Bendis and Walker. And God, I blanked on the artist's name. That's terrible because I've been reviewing this series. But it looks like with Naomi's origin in place, she's going to be positioned to join the greater DCU. What that looks like, I guess we will find out. But this has been a fantastic series. I'm not going to be shocked if it gets nominated for some Eisners at some point next year, I guess for next year. So, yep, that's me. Cody, what do you got?
I haven't read anything this week other than stuff I'm reviewing or stuff I was preparing for the show. I did read Uncanny last night during my not sleeping binge, and it was good. It was, more of the same. Just keep pushing in that direction. For things I'm looking forward to, I'm actually pretty excited about Event Leviathan #2, which is funny because I was not interested in Event Leviathan until I read #1. And now I just want to know. Like, Maliv's art with Bendis writing is just so damn good. Like, they work so well together that, yeah, man, I'm hooked. Like, let's do this. I'm also looking forward to, I know even though it came out today, DC #3. I heard that's a real barn burner, and I haven't had a chance to sit down and read it yet, but I hear it's a tearjerker. I hear it's hard to read in some points because it's just so raw and painful, so I'm really looking forward to that because I guess I'm a masochist. And that's about it for me, and I think that's it for the episode. So, Brian, you want to take us out?
Yeah, I don't remember what I normally do, but thank you for watching this episode. Make sure you check us out on www.comic-watch.com. You can always check us out on Twitter, and I think we have a new Instagram account. It's something weird, Comic Watch -Ace, ACE. Also, check us out on a multitude of platforms. We are on Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, a whole bunch of other crap I probably don't even know because I've been gone for 2 months. You can check us out at the Comic Watchers on all of those platforms as well. We will see you guys next week. Bye!